Okay folks, we need to talk about Dax Shepard because his world of lies is finally being exposed. Now apparently this guy is not only a bully, but an American traitor. So to understand Dax, you have to start with the fact that he grew up incredibly rich. Summers in Italy and winters in Paris, a life most of us could only dream of. And though he never speaks of it, Dax grew up with a half-brother, Scott. And according to family members, Dax looked up to his older half-brother and wanted to be just like him. While away in college, Scott discovers open mic comedy and even tries his own hand at it with the addition of props. And by graduation time, he had become a successful local performer called Carrot Top. Now I know you're thinking, I would have heard of Dax and Carrot Top being related, but actually they've both worked very hard to keep this from the public sphere. So by the time Dax is studying at Princeton, his brother Scott, aka Carrot Top, has reached the heights of comedic performance, appearing regularly on Jay Leno, touring the US, and even landing a starring role in his own movie that would go on to be known as the film of a generation. And it's at this point where Dax completely drops his interest in anthropology and starts performing at open mics just like his older brother had. And there's nothing that strange about two siblings pursuing stand-up other than the fact that this is when Dax started denying being related to Scott. Even Dax's Princeton fraternity brothers claimed Dax never even mentioned he was related to the famous performer. Now this isn't a case of Dax wanting to make his own way and honorably refusing a helping hand. It's quite the opposite. See, Dax had his ear to the ground and as a college student picked up on the anti-Carrot Top wave that was brewing. So while at one point he might have bragged that his older brother was on TV, Dax knew that soon this would be the equivalent to bragging that you have an autograph from the Baja Man. So Dax claims no relation to Carrot Top, he's not good at stand-up. So how does Dax get from performing at Princeton open mics to being a Hollywood star? Well, after a year of treading water, Dax in fact did give in to utilizing his brother's fame and connections. Carrot Top had become buddies with Ashton Kutcher and even opening a trucker hat shop on Sunset together. So long story short, Carrot Top is the one who gets Dax his first job on Punk'd, and that launches him into becoming a regular working actor. So as soon as Dax felt stable footing on his show Punk'd, you can guess what happens next. He once again refuses to claim his brother, and this time he even asks poor Scott to do the same. And this is really sad because Scott loved Dax and he understood Dax didn't want the name association, and he has thus far respected Dax's wishes. And I can't even imagine having a younger brother that I gave a career to, and then they ask me to pretend we aren't related. It seems beyond cruel. So Dax is plucking along Hollywood for years, getting small parts in movies, but he finds that he's not able to jump to the next level. Now it's around this time that Dax has become very close friends with one Michael Rosenbaum. And if you don't know that name, that's okay, you've definitely seen him in something, as he's also been a working actor since the 90s. And he was even in the Jamie Kennedy movie Kicking It Old School that featured Moist Critical as an extra, which is how he was discovered and launched his full career. So Michael Rosenbaum and Dax have the same problem. They can get roles, but they aren't getting more famous. And in Rosenbaum's case, he was very talented, very funny, and a pleasure to be around. So there wasn't a clear reason for this Hollywood blockade. And eventually Michael gets sick of it. He's tired of waiting to be asked to do something, and he creates one of the early podcasts, literally before it was a thing. Now he wasn't the first, I'm not claiming that, but he was a very early adapter and would again suffer the same fate of not getting the recognition he deserves. Only this time it wasn't Hollywood that was screwing over Michael Rosenbaum, it was Dax. So Michael starts his podcast and it's doing okay considering that podcasts aren't really a thing yet. After a few years though, podcasts are part of our everyday lives. And so Dax sees that Michael Rosenbaum chose correctly, starting a podcast years ago. And so Dax does something really devious here. He steals his friend Michael's entire Datacom list, giving him access to every listener that Michael had accrued over the last 4 years. So Dax gets to start a podcast with 200,000 listeners before he's even recorded an episode. And of course, when Michael Rosenbaum figured this out after Dax launches his podcast, he's devastated. All the work Michael did, and Dax gets to reap the benefits. Now here's where it gets incredibly devious. Dax was always very tech savvy, and so when he starts releasing his podcast episodes to his 200,000 plus audience, he's careful to hashtag Kristen Bell, as well as the names of Kristen Bell movies. Now at the time, they don't know each other. This is just Dax's devious plan to get into her life. See, he knew if he could get into a tabloid celebrity relationship while simultaneously launching a podcast, that would surely cement him into fame. And that's exactly what happened. Kristen Bell fell for his Princeton charm and wit, and before long, they were a couple. And Dax's podcast was the most listened to show of all time. But something must have changed over at Camp Carrot Top because he's recently come out against his younger brother's abuse and is speaking about it for the first time. Now, according to Scott, Kristen Bell was his celebrity crush, and the only reason Dax even targeted her was to hurt Scott. And when asked why he's speaking out now after all these years, Scott recalls a cruel recent encounter. The last time he saw his brother, Dax said he would have Scott over for Christmas and he could finally meet Dax's kids if he'll simply do one thing, and that thing was to eat human feces. And apparently the distraught Carrot Top did indeed ingest human poop, as per the agreement, only to find Dax would never make good on his side of the promise. It was just a twisted story, and there's much more about this guy, including his class action lawsuit against Kraft Macaroni and Cheese and his ongoing beef with Kodak Black, but we'll have to save that for another episode. For now, Dax Shepard, you're a total bitch. Okay guys, let me know who you want me to cover next. If there's wicked people out there performing heinous acts, leave it in the comments and we'll get on the case.